died of COVID. This is a disease that is touching absolutely everybody, and no one is immune to it. And the fear that it raises because it's novel is heightened in absolutely everyone. And so that is totally changing my role. I mean, staff is exhausted, patients are exhausted, family is exhausted, going to the grocery store is exhausted, the grocery clerk is exhausted, sitting behind it just, wherever I go, people are telling me their stories of exhaustion.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anyone else want to talk about that whole concept of alone and isolation?
I think that is really hard for patients and families and staff. I mean, I find even myself, my working environment, I'm in my office a lot, not getting to rooms as much as we used to because of the precautions. But we're doing things like making sure that we do Zoom calls with patients and families and phone calls as much as we can. I had a patient who passed away last week that they did a Zoom just before he passed so that the family could actually physically see him. And it was such it was rewarding and very sad all in the same concept that, I mean, we have to go to those extremes, but those are kinds of things that are so important. I had, and people think that this is just older people passing, and it's not, it's younger. I had a younger patient, not super young, but a younger patient not too long ago who I am familiar with outside of the hospital, whose mother happens to be a friend of mine. And I made sure she was on a ventilator, but I made sure that I went by her room to make sure to see what she physically looked like. I called the mother and told her she was resting well. And the mother told me later that that's the best thing that she heard, because she heard all the medical stuff, but she wanted to know that her daughter was resting peacefully. And she did well, fortunately. Not every patient does well. And I think families need to know that at that end, if that does come, that there's someone there to help. And I think the nursing staff are just, I'm in awe of our nursing staff and all the nurses, palliative care, as well as our frontline nurses, of what they do for holding those hands at end of life.
Yeah, very much so.
Yes, I would like to add something to that, if it's...
Please.
Okay. Yes, just two things. One thing is about the loneliness attached to beliefs. For some of these experiences, people express the loneliness also from the way how they used to connect, because there were many restrictions and changes in practices where people have restrictions to connect to the way how they believe, the way how they practice their faith, the way how they connect with any ritual, or just because we need to provide some safety and all of that. So as a chaplains, that respond to try to provide that company and those expressions of loneliness, and people express the loneliness and the relationship with God, with any spiritual connection. So that's just kind of one of the part of the loneliness too. And also the language will add to that loneliness too. I work with Spanish-speaking patients, and many of them they don't speak any English, so it's so difficult for them to understand what is happening, what is being provided to them, and even though we have the interpreters, but also for the families, and some of the families, they don't have the decision maker as the first a person to communicate, but they will have somebody, especially usually a young person who speaks English, and they will communicate to them. So there is that communication that causes that loneliness too.
Very much so. Say, Father, while you're on just a second, Liliana Salgado from Univision is one of our journalists joining us today. And she's wondering if you could say some of your answers, or maybe repeat your answer in Spanish, but maybe what we'll do with that, if you have time, is we'll save a little time at the end for any of the panelists who do speak Spanish, and then we can just have questions and answers in Spanish, if that sounds okay. Does that sound okay?
Absolutely, yes.
That would be really wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we do have some questions rolling in here from the journalists. This one comes from Joe McLean. And in your experience, what's the biggest challenge, the most common challenge that patients face coping with COVID-19? Should we start with Chris on this one?
Sure. I think there are many big challenges, but I think by far the largest one is the isolation. The I can't speak to my family directly. I don't have that physical contact with them. That probably is the biggest challenge. And depending on the severity of the disease, this is a very difficult illness to fight. And so without family support with you and being able to touch you and talk to you, that is really, really difficult.
Yeah. Anyone else want to tackle that? How about Marian? Let's jump around a little bit.
I think also, in addition to what Christine said, to me, one of the challenges is the disbelief that this is a severe illness. And I think it's been, in our society that people aren't believing some of the things that are happening around them. I spoke to a palliative care nurse last week when I was leaving work, and she was in tears. And she says to me, I had to tell a patient, the patient looked at me and said, "Tell me what I'm dying of." And it's like she was in disbelief that she was actually going to pass away, and she passed away before the nurse left the room. And it's sad that our society has not taken that as serious and wearing masks like we should. I mean, I think there are people out there that are, but there are still some that are in disbelief. I had a friend of mine that said to me not too long ago, she said, "Isn't this just like the flu?" And I said, "No, it's not like the flu. It's more serious than that." If I could bring people to see those patients that are in such severe cases, they would understand. What you see on TV is what's happening in the bigger cities as well as our rural areas. And we have to be vigilant about tackling this as a group.
Thank you, Marian.
I want to piggyback on Christine's comment about the isolation. The isolation from being the nurse in the room, that's the thing that's almost hitting the patients the hardest. I spent the better part of one of my days working diligently to try to get a family member to be able to Zoom with their loved one. And it finally ended up happening towards the end of my shift. And the Zoom meeting didn't last long. It might have been 20 to 30 minutes. And afterwards, I stuck my head in and I asked the patient, I was like, how did it go? And their response was, it was therapeutic. And that patient later that night ended up coding and being intubated. And actually just learned today that the gentleman that does our Zoom meetings, that sets them up, he got an email from that family member and was just so grateful because that was the last time that they got to see their loved one with their eyes open and talk to them. So what we're doing right here, this Zoom meeting, has been one of the beneficials for us to be able to have, for them to connect. And knowing that that loved one reached out to our guy, and that guy got to talk back to me and let me know that that happened, and is really wonderful. It makes me feel happy that I did what I did, and makes me feel just so much joy and pride in what I do, is to be able to help them connect. And the fact that I was able to help them connect that one last time was really amazing.
Wow. Thank you, James.
Sorry, Ginger. If I
Go
could.
ahead.
So one of the things that also I feel that's so difficult and has really altered the change of my job, I talked to a COVID patient whose husband died of a heart attack and was so terrified to come to the hospital that he died at home. And 2 days later, she's now COVID positive, and she doesn't know what she's going to go home to. She doesn't know how she's going to be. And she's very disconnected from her church. She's disconnected from everything because she no longer has any resources. So our resources have been scattered in so many different directions in terms of what we feel like we can depend on, you know, that's there to support us. I spent a lot of time with her, and now I'm becoming her resource, being in the hospital as a COVID patient.
Yeah, above and beyond, for sure.
Just
All
to
right, we
touch
do.
on that, just to touch on that with community resources, as a social worker, one of the things that, you know, I felt like part of my job was before COVID more so was the community resource piece, because we're always looking for housing or financial or food resources for patients that are in need. I feel like that has somewhat still been there, but put on the back burner because we're in crisis mode. I'm looking at the immediate needs, such as what Gina just said, with the emotional things that are going on at home for patients. I feel like I work more with that and trying to comfort them about what it's going to be like when they go home than I ever did before. Before it was like they're going to go home with their family, everything will be fine. Now we don't know what kind of environment they're going to go to. We don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot more unpredictable.
Very
their
unpredictable.
course of care. All right. One of the other questions from Joe is, when will staff at Mayo Clinic receive the vaccine? So I'll just say this, Joe, it's different at different locations because it's really guided by each state, and we have locations in several states. But maybe I'll ask the panelists, have any of you received your vaccine yet? And if so, how did that go for you?
I did, and it was purely amazing. This is Gina in Arizona, and I will tell you, we partnered with Honor Health. We got the Pfizer first vaccine. Honor Health, we did a phenomenal job. I have never seen anything like it. I think I bragged to everybody after the fact of, they scooted you in, they got you there, they gave you the shot, they made sure you were okay, and then you go home. You know, the shot is like a normal, I think, a flu shot. Your arm hurts, you can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it went really well.
Good. Others?
Yes, I have received the vaccine too. Well, the first thing is a blessing to be able to receive that. Very grateful with Mayo and how they are helping us through this situation. But especially also was a time to be grateful and to think about those who we don't know how and when they will be receiving the vaccine. I'm from Colombia, and I received many messages from family and friends and kind of congratulations. You know, this is huge. It's amazing that you have received the vaccine. So sometimes we take things for granted, but this is a great blessing. And it made me think about those who probably will have to wait for a longer time. Yes, that's kind of my experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I received the vaccine 2 weeks ago also, and I was honored that I was able to get it, well, because I'm right in critical care. And I too feel very honored to have it, and have had many people, because I made sure I let my family know, and people that might be skeptical, I had no reaction whatsoever from it. It's like a flu shot. And I had people from my family in Europe who were just so excited that I was able to get it and cannot wait till it's open for everyone. So I find it great that we were able to get it at Mayo in Eau Claire.
How about Christine or James?
I received my vaccine on Christmas Eve, which was, I think, the best Christmas present I ever got. And I think I agree, it's a very easy shot to get, and very few people are having side effects. If anything, just body aches and not feeling well the day after. But I'm so excited because I think that as we get more and more doses, more and more people will be able to be vaccinated. And most of the patients and families that I've interviewed are very excited to be vaccinated, which is positive.
Yeah. James?
I received the vaccine 3 days ago, I believe. And I think we've got Moderna now. I think we've already actually had a Pfizer rollout before. And I too feel really just blessed that I was able to be in that beginning stages. Not to say that I'm not going to continue doing my other levels of PPE out in the world, still wearing my mask and still going to continually diligently washing my hands and everything. It's one extra layer of protection now that I feel that I have that was not in my control. So.
All right, thank you. Did I get everybody on that? I think so. Yes, we did. All right, thank you guys. Okay, this question is from Alex. How hard is it to stay positive with COVID patients when dealing with an unpredictable disease? And what do COVID patients find the most comforting while battling the virus? Perhaps let's start with Gina.
So it's funny that you started with me. So besides being a chaplain, I'm also, I have my clinical MFT, and my focus is positive psychology and resilience. And the thing about positive psychology is it's not about accepting what is in front of you, but it's a way of functioning within the chaos. So for me as a human being, I have a very strong sense of faith. And I try to encourage that in the patients that I see, no matter what their faith is. It is very difficult right now because resources are to the sidelines a little bit. Churches aren't meeting, there's no mass, it's hard to have that. At the same time, I think it's also a wake-up call for us as human beings. What were we wasting? What were we not valuing? I'm a huge one about gratitude and being grateful for the moments and the small things. And I think our culture was moving so fast, it forgot that. And so for me, there is this strange silver lining of what is important, who is important, how is important. It's not about the stuff anymore. It's about the simple things. And so I think that I have helped with both staff and patients, and even COVID patients, of viewing that as well, of acceptance of, a patient said this to me yesterday. He said, I'm not going to get out of life alive. And there's some truth to the matter of, celebrate the R's as opposed to the have-nots of it.
Thank you, Gina. How about Father Jose? So when we're talking about things that patients find the most comforting, I understand that you have been quite busy with the sacrament of anointing the sick. How many times do you think you have performed that sacrament in the last 10 months? Just ballpark it.
Thank you. Yes, that is something that I have no idea. So many times that I don't have track of that. But just want to say, from the beginning of the pandemic, we were 2 priests full time and responding 24/7. So we will do shift of 72 hours sometimes. And then the clinic has been so gracious to help us with another one. So now we are 3, and we have some supplementals here. But we work as a team very well with about 30 more chaplains in Rochester. So we developed that work as a team. But many times, and as for Catholics, at the end of life, the ritual of anointing is so important. So I have ministered that to patients who have died with COVID, and as a way of, they requested that as a way of a connection with God, as a way of assuring the mercy, the reconciliation, that they are in peace, that they can keep in their journey. So many times, and they are graciously all the priests that we respond to that.
Thank you, Father. Who else wants to, I won't make you all answer every question, but who else wants to answer, what do patients find the most comforting?
I can speak to that briefly. A lot of the patients that we see with COVID have other serious illnesses as well. And so a majority of our patients that we see in the palliative team may not leave the hospital. So I think for that group of patients, one of the most comforting things is to know that we will keep you comfortable, to know that we will meet your needs for symptom control, and to know that there's always something to hope for. It may not be living another year, it might not be living another month, but there's always something to hope for, and we can help find it. So I think that really is important to people. But then the other piece of that was the unpredictability of this illness. You know, sometimes people have a really good day and they'll think, oh, wow, I'm getting better. And the next day they'll be back in the ICU. So it's really very difficult for people to work through that in their minds, and just know that one good day doesn't mean that you're going to have the rest of your days be good. So continuing to acknowledge that this is very difficult and we can help.
Thank you, Christine. All right, so can you, anyone who would like, talk about some of the things that can help guide a family when a loved one is in the ICU, such as power of attorney, medical directive? What are some things that people could do now that may be helpful if their loved ones are in this situation?
I can start with that. That if I could tell everybody in the United States what they need to do first is make sure that they have a power of attorney or advance directive in place. And not to just keep it at your home, but make sure that you have it filed with your medical professionals, your hospital, your physician, and make sure that whoever you have as an agent or your family, that you make sure they have copies of it. It is extremely important. This is the document that if you are incapacitated, that you have named an agent in writing, not just verbally, but in writing, who you would like to make decisions for you in the event that you have an event like this and are not able to make medical decisions for yourself. Many people confuse it with a will. It is different than your will. It is an advance directive. It tells us medically what you would like and who you would like to appoint as that person to speak for you. Anyone over the age of 18 needs to have one. And every state is different. So it's important to have one that is from the state from where you live. Wisconsin is not a next of kin state. So it is important that we have that document in place. So a lot of what I do is looking for that document, whether or not it's with another facility or with your family. So I'm looking for that document and trying to get those completed while a patient's in the hospital.
So when you say Wisconsin is not a next of kin state, can you just explain what that means? That the next of kin is not automatically the decision maker?
Correct. It would not automatically go. I have patients who will say to me, oh, my wife, she knows everything about me. She can take care of it. And I'll ask, is it in writing? And if they say no, then they may not be the person that we would contact. If a person does not have that and we need those decision makers, those large decisions to be made, it would have to go to a court system to appoint a guardian. And that guardian may or may not be your family, depending on who the family is. The court makes that decision, not us. And it can be very costly and time consuming. So every state has one. They're just different. And some people think once they get one, that it's good in all the states, but it's not always good in every state. So it's important to see what state you have. And you can go to your state Department of Human Services and look up advanced directives and find an advanced directive that fits your state for the state statutes.
Thank you, Marian. Anyone else want to talk about that
I would like to say a few things about that.
Sure.
I think it's very important for people not only to choose their agents, but to choose the agents who would honor their wishes. So having that discussion with them about their wishes and who would be willing and able to carry that out, because sometimes families have different beliefs on how they would want mom or dad treated, or husbands and wives even have disparate opinions. And so it's important, if you have wishes for yourself, or everybody does, that you choose someone to be your agent who will actually honor those.
All right, thank you. So just so we're clear, some of those decisions might be if you want a ventilator, if you want to be on a feeding tube, if you want to be prolonged, or if you would like to be let go, etc. Is that
Correct,
what we're
as
talking about?
well as where you want to receive care post-hospitalization. Sometimes if the patient does not have the capacity, in the state of Wisconsin, a person cannot be in a long-term care facility without a power of attorney in place or a guardianship if they're incapacitated.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Just looking through what questions we have. Okay. This comes from WKBT. If there was a message you'd like to put out there to the families who are missing their loved ones, what would that message be? Let's start with Father Jose.
Yes. I was in one of my cases. I was in one of the rooms, and one of the nurses was trying to always encourage this patient that doesn't speak English. So that has stayed with me. So this nurse that doesn't speak Spanish either wrote something in a piece of paper that says, "No estás solo. You are not alone." And so these nurse will show that to the patient every day. So what I want to say to the families is that you are not alone. And there are many people as a team working also in the hospitals, helping for supporting your loved ones. And we'll get through this. There is hope, and we are all together in this situation.
Thank you, Father. That's lovely. James, how about you?
That's exactly right. Your loved ones aren't alone. We're here with them. We're holding their hands. We're talking to them. We're engaging with them as best we can. It's really important to know that these patients aren't patients. They're our family. They really are. We've become brothers or sisters or daughters or husbands, just anything we can. We become a member of their family to let them know that they're not going to be alone. For family at home to feel comforting to know that their loved one is being taken care of. Like they wanted to know what did they do for a living? What do they like to do? So we're engaging with them. We're talking to them. We're not just leaving them alone to wonder what's going to happen next. We will do everything we can. I'm a big advocate for physical therapy. I love it. If we can do it, let's go. Engaging as much as we can. We have an ability to see a little bit of a pond outside. If we can get the bed turned or a chair so we can see, we'll do it. Whatever we can to ensure that these patients feel as if they're being loved and cherished and taken care of, just like their loved ones would take care of them, we will do it. So.
Thank you guys for everything you do. Christine, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I think agreeing with James, it's so important for families to know that we are there every day and we spend as much time as we possibly can with their loved one. And to know that the communication lines are open so family members can call us at any time too, I think is very reassuring.
Great, thank you. All right, let's move. We've got some questions piling up here, so let's move on to some other ones. So just a quick clarifying question from Liliana from Univision. So what happens if a patient does not have a power of attorney or a medical directive? Marion, do you want to address that?
Someone does not have that directive and they're able to make a directive, then in our hospital in Northwest Wisconsin, we would go to that patient and try to complete that. If I can't go in the room with them, then I would co-sign it until we can make a directive at some point. So we explained it to them and they tell us what to do, and we use that as our record at this point. If a person does not have one and is incapacitated, and we do need some of those decisions made, then we would have to ask the family to go to start procedures for a guardianship. And we help them through that process. We fax things to lawyers, we talk to them about it, maybe human services is involved. And so that the social worker is the one that would help the family through that process.
Wow, so I can see where that makes your job a lot harder if
Yes.
that's not in place.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. This question from Alex. For the part of the public that does not believe in the severity of the virus, can you describe how COVID patients' experience is different than that of someone who catches the flu? How about we start with James?
So how not the severity of the disease. So we've heard about asymptomatic patients. We've heard about patients that are getting so sick they're on ECMO, or they definitely need to be on a ventilator or a high flow cannula. Every patient's going to be completely different. And it's been an interesting journey to watch patients, how some patients do get better quickly. Some patients you'll see at day 6 or 7, all of a sudden starts to turn south and you know it's going to go bad. Different than the flu in the sense that there are some days where when you have the flu and getting up and out of bed might just take a little bit of the wind out of you. Here it takes a lot of the wind. Your sails get deflated quickly. Bending over to pick something off the floor can drop somebody's saturations pretty significantly really quick. And whereas before it could take a little bit of time for them to recover, it can end up taking twice as long or 3 times as long. And the disease process can rapidly deteriorate within hours. Somebody can go from being perfectly okay to really needing all that extra support that we're able to provide. So we see it that some are not as bad, but it's just so unknown as to why some are so more severe than others, then it's really not worth tempting. I mean, as silly as it is, wearing the mask and just all that is so important to do. If you can't stay away from, if you can't be socially distant, then wear the mask, because you might be fine by the time you get home. Hours later, you could be getting rushed to the emergency room. So it happens quickly, and that's the big thing. Is the rapid progression of this is the scariest part of it, I would say.
Yeah, very unpredictable for each person. Okay, so can any of you, maybe Christine or Father Jose or Gina, can you talk about fear? What are the fears that the patients are facing, their families are facing, and how do you help address those fears? Father Jose, do you want to start?
Thank you. Well, the fears, the first fear that I can think about is, of course, death, the first to die. Somebody get the COVID, I have heard them talking about, I don't know if I'm going to make it. So they start talking about anything can happen. I don't know if I'm going to survive. So that's a big fear. The other fear is about from families and patients not able to communicate between them. So we don't know how is this gonna end, if I'm going to be able to say goodbye, if it's the case is death, or the company, etc. So those are kind of the fears. The first one for death, well, start talking about from our discipline to discover what give them some meaning and how they connect with that topic of death, and if it's any they will support and help the patients in that way. And in the communication with the families, I just want to share something. It is so important and it's so difficult at the same time. And if it's at the end of life, for them to give them messages, but at the same time, it's so difficult for them to do it, even though we have all these systems and video calls, but to do it to that is so difficult. I was in one of my experiences where many times, especially those Spanish-speaking families, asking me to pass a message to those who were in that situation. So to communicate with them, to let them know that they love them, that they want them to be at peace if it's the end, or that they are waiting for them to come back home. That communication is part of this experience.
You're on mute, Ginger.
Sorry. Christine, would you like to talk about fear and how you help patients with fears?
Sure. I think one, not only the patient's fears of what's going to happen to me now, and that is so prevalent in people who are hospitalized with COVID. I think, as I said before, just to make sure that they are reassured that we will work as hard as we can to manage their symptoms and make sure that they are comfortable. But then families are so afraid of giving this disease to someone else who might be vulnerable in the family. And so I think reinforcing the information about distancing and about masking and how to protect yourself as well as others, that alleviates some of that panic. And there's always someone who can talk to them and give them information. And so just to know that the experts are here and can help them at any time, I think is important.
Thank you. How about Gina or Marion or James? Do any of you want to talk about that?
So one of the things that I think that is so hard about the fear is more than just the COVID. The fear is also how, if I do survive this, how am I going to pay for this? How is my family going to survive this? We had a young lady, we actually had a swan song of an amazing patient. She was a young woman who maybe 30 something years old, had just had a baby. The whole family got COVID. We took her from the county hospital, put her on ECMO, and she survived it. Incredible story of a woman with 4 young kids, and her husband was terrified of how are we going to do this. And the social workers got together, and we all got together, and we did a GoFundMe. Mayo is so much more than just medicine. Mayo is about family system. It's just a blessing that we have been given the opportunity to do so much more than just fix it. We took this young lady from a place of, I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, we moved her out of the ICU on a bed outside so that she could reintegrate the family again. It was an incredible story. When she left, balloons went up and because we get so many of those stories that are not so good, and she was really an amazing one. But that doesn't mean that her family wasn't terrified of how that they were going to deal with it. And so this is one of those moments of the village came through. We all came through. The Mariannes, the Jose's, the Jims, the Christines, all of us, you, Ginger, came through for this young lady and gave her life back. So it's an incredible story.
That's great. Thanks, Gina. All right. So I know that we're almost running out of time, and I want to ask, so Ricky from Tucson is a journalist from Tucson. So this question is for you, Gina, because you're in his neck of the wood. But some people are skeptical or refuse to take a vaccine. After your experience, what would you say to those who might be on the fence?
You know, it's a very hard thing to address somebody's deep-seated fear that's illogical. But this is science. And I know that we vaccine our children for the better of our children. I know that we rely on the medical system. You know, the funny thing is they would be the first to come in to the hospital if they were sick. I'm married to an emergency room physician, and he is just besides himself right now with the amount of people that are coming in that are actually either okay or taking away beds from folks, you know, that need to be stinted. It is important to remember it's not about Big Brother. This is science. It's on the up. I had no issues with the vaccine, and I have issues with everything in terms of allergies. It's an honor. You want to rely on science if something really goes wrong? Well, rely on preventative science as well, because it's important. Have faith, both in God and the system.
All right, thank you, Gina. Okay, one question I'd love for all of you to answer is, as you look back on this whole pandemic experience, maybe a few years from now, are there any situations or specific, without giving away patient and private information, but are there any situations that will stick with you forever? And what are those? Let's start with Christine.
I think one of them just recently for me was a family who was they were working so hard to protect themselves against getting the virus in the first place, but many of the people that they knew or the people who lived around them didn't believe that COVID actually was real. And one of this family members ended up dying from COVID, and the rest of the family was just like, okay, now we were led to believe that COVID isn't real, and we were so careful, and now we have this. I know that this is not the last pandemic that we're going to have, and I hope that when there's another pandemic, we will look upon it differently.
All right, thank you, Christine. James, you've seen a lot. What are some that'll stick with you?
There's a couple. The first patient that we lost, that patient's going to stay with me. I did a lot to make sure that the family was able to be involved in the Zoom call and everything, and did what we could to actually get the patient to have a loved one come up and see them. And that was a lot, and that was meaningful. Recently, there was a local story that was done about a patient, and they made it home for Christmas. And it was, I was thrilled. They had done a couple of stories, and this one, they made it home for Christmas, and I was ecstatic. So that's going to be extremely meaningful to me. They actually want to give me something, and as a remembrance, and I'm looking forward to seeing it and being able to hold on to it, because that'll be a memory. And then there's another family who I've kind of bonded with that's been kind of close. I'm actually going to probably run up and see them before I go back to my unit, just to say hey and see what the plan is for the next couple of weeks or when are we going to make it back home? So there are way too many patients to have remembered every one of them. But I know the day that I took care of them, they did touch me on that day. And for however many days I did take care of them, but there's at least 3 that I know, maybe even 4 or more, that will definitely pop into my head in the coming years. So
That's great. How about you, Father?
Thank you. I have a couple too. The first one is I was asked to. This patient was dying too from COVID. There was nothing else that was possible to do for him, and the wife asked me to go into the room, and we offered the video call, but she said no, I can't do that. But I can ask you if you please go, give a blessing, and tell him that I love him, that
Mayo Clinic is committed to creating a safe environment for our patients and staff. To ensure everyone's
I'm
safety,
working today.
we require that patients, visitors, and staff wear a face mask that properly covers both your nose and mouth while on Mayo Clinic's campus. Thank you for your help.
That's just a very important message.
Yeah, it was this cameo appearance. Okay, continue, Father.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So is that experience going in and bringing that message? So the message of love, that she loved him, that they will be okay, and that he can rest in peace. For me, it's a great blessing. I say this is something that I will never forget. Give me joy, give me meaning to my ministry, my life, my personal life. And I say, what a blessing to be in those sacred time and places for people. And the second one is kind of the same. A mother asking me at midnight, you have to wake up at midnight and respond to that call, asking for hold the hand of her son and give a blessing and goodbye. Kind of the same. So those 2 experiences will stay with me.
Wow. How about Marion? How about you?
I have had several with patients, as has been described earlier, the connection that you have with their families. I think back about my own life, and when I was very young, I survived a tornado in Iowa, and we went through a huge crisis then, and this is a huge crisis now. And I think people are resilient, and I think people will go through it, and we will overcome it. I would encourage people to get the vaccine and to wear their masks. And one of the other things that I think is so special is what either Christine or Gina said about our family is Mayo. And I really feel that connection. And especially recently, Mayo gave us face masks that have the Mayo logo on it. And when I wear that in the community, and that's one thing that they said is, wear it as a sign that we are supporting what is being done. And when I wear it, I see people wearing them, and we kind of look at each other like we have this spirit between us because we work at Mayo. And it is so important to work with these families that are in such a crisis. And I do feel it's quite the honor, and that it's not just social workers, chaplains, and nurses and doctors, but it's the housekeepers, it's the people that are the dietitians, the lab techs, the CNAs. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together, and we provide this team that works together to provide care for their loved ones. And I think that will always stick in my memory, because it is similar to what happened to me when I went through a tornado. The community came together to help each other. And that's what I remember so fondly of that crisis. And I hope that people remember that in this crisis too.
Great, thank you. Gina.
You know, one of the bigger memories for me would be we had a very early in February, back in February or March, we had a woman who was turned away at that time. The testing wasn't so great and we didn't know she had COVID. So she had gone to a lot of medical systems and she didn't come up positive, but everybody kind of felt that she was COVID. So she comes into our emergency room and my husband gets her and she looks at him and says to him, "Don't let me die." And it's the first time he's picked up the phone and called me and said, "I need your prayers because she doesn't want to die and I don't want her to die either." Her husband is a transplant patient. She's the caregiver. And so the next day I came in, she had not been intubated yet. She was COVID positive. And I went to her bedside and I said, "I'm going to pray that you don't die." And I got the biggest smile. And the best part was she didn't die. She was intubated, but we got her out. She was extubated 5 days later. That left such an impression of somebody saying, not "I don't want to die, don't let me die."
Wow.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. So we are now at 5 after the hour. I want to be respectful of our panelists' time, and I know we want to hang on the line for a few minutes with Univision. And if there's any other Spanish-speaking media who have joined us, feel free to hang on. And if any of the panelists besides Father Jose speak Spanish, please hang on. But otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up. I really wanted to thank all of you for sharing your time and your experiences, but also just for what you do every day for patients and families. What an amazing gift you are. So thank you. So for those who want to hang on, please do. Everyone else, thank you for joining us. And we will have a copy of this recording. If you should need it, just send us an email, newsbureau@mayo.edu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. So, yeah.
Thank you guys very much.
All right, Liliana, are you still with us?
Yes, here I am.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and just talk directly, because I don't speak Spanish. So.
Sure. Thank you. Padre José Morales, si podría en español, por favor, explicarnos cuál es su trabajo con los pacientes de coronavirus.
Muchas gracias. Sí, soy el Padre José, soy capellán en la clínica Mayo. Mi trabajo como capellán es proveer cuidado espiritual a cualquier persona que habla español también, pues, a cualquier paciente, pero dentro de eso estoy encargado también con aquellos que hablan español, sin importar su creencia o no creencia, proveer ese apoyo espiritual, algo que les provee a ellos fuerza, fortaleza, algo que les traiga paz o alegría en los momentos de las enfermedades o de las muertes o lo que estén enfrentando. También soy sacerdote católico, entonces respondo también a las necesidades de los pacientes también que hablan, que piden los sacramentos católicos, pero como capellanes respondemos a cualquier persona de cualquier fe y tradición.
En este momento su trabajo, más que nunca, ¿no? En un momento en cual pacientes están aislados, ustedes brindan cierta dosis de espiritualidad estando ellos solos. ¿Cuál es el testimonio que más lo ha impactado? ¿Algún paciente que más se ha quedado grabado con usted en esta temporada de COVID?
Sí, la experiencia que comentaba también hace un momento es esta experiencia, bueno, con varios, pero esta en particular, donde la familia no tiene la fuerza para despedirse de esta persona que estaba muriendo de este COVID. Y entonces me piden a mí a ir a transmitir el mensaje, ¿no? Es esta esposa que me dice, padre, vaya a la habitación, por favor, yo no puedo hacerlo por videollamada. Está en ese momento tan difícil de shock. Vaya y por favor le da una bendición, le dice que lo amo, le dice que vamos a estar bien y que por favor descanse en paz. Es una experiencia que se va a quedar conmigo porque habla de la importancia, de la posibilidad que tenemos nosotros, de la bendición de poder estar en esos momentos tan delicados y que se van a quedar siempre en el recuerdo de las personas, de las familias y por supuesto de nosotros.
Con los pacientes que son personas que están dentro de un cuarto sin ver a sus familias, ¿cuáles son sus peticiones hacia usted, ya sea como padre católico o como persona, que a veces solamente quieren con alguien con quien hablar?
Sí, esa es una, ¿no? El poder hablar, el poder compartir sus frustraciones, sus miedos, como lo hablábamos. Eso es lo que hacemos, ir a escucharlos, estar atentos de cualquier necesidad que tenga y que podamos ayudar a responderla. A veces, especialmente con los pacientes que no hablan el inglés, que hablan, en mi caso, más experiencia con los que hablan español, a veces hasta un vaso de agua, a veces hasta puede hablar con el doctor, la enfermera, para esta pregunta. Tenemos los intérpretes, por supuesto, que prestan un servicio increíble, pero a veces nos encontramos con esas necesidades básicas, inmediatas, que también tenemos que ayudar a solucionar. Comunicación. He tenido experiencias en personas que me dicen, puede llamar a mi familia que está en México, que está en otro país, a apoyarlos porque deben estar muy preocupados y hay personas que están con una o dos personas aquí de familia, el resto la tienen fuera de este país. Entonces, comunicación también con la familia ha sido una parte importante que podemos ofrecer. Por supuesto, además del apoyo espiritual.
Por último, en las videollamadas, ¿usted suele estar presente cuando un paciente ya está en lo último de su vida o cuál es ese proceso?
Sí, si la familia lo pide, nosotros estamos siempre de acuerdo a lo que ellos necesiten. Entonces, eso hace parte de nuestra compañía, ¿no? Me han pedido claramente en varias ocasiones puede estar ahí, ¿no? Puede estar como para pasar ese mensaje a pesar de que está el iPad, o la tableta o lo que esté ahí, para comunicarse necesitan a alguien que esté ahí como haciéndole saber a esa persona que ellos también están presentes.
Perfecto. Son todas mis preguntas. Muchas gracias. Thank you guys so much. Those were all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thanks for the extra time, Father Jose. And thanks, Liliana.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right, we will call it a day, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.